Hey guys, hope everyone's doing well as we start week 2. Just wanted to encourage you to keep up the hard work. You've been doing great. Reminder that we do have those projects. If you didn't check your email yet, please make sure you do that. I've sent out a lot of information to you about that can get you on the right track. Hopefully this time of me sharing through, going through some of your notes is helpful to you. I'm at least hoping it is, but I just wanted to share a little bit more about this chapter and what we're going to be going through. This will be part 2, animal behavior. The first part was more on the systems and how the body works. And then this part of the chapter is more of how and why animals act the way they do, including us. And so the study of animal behavior itself is going to be ethology. And that's looking at what an animal does and then how it does it, the actions that they take, and then what drives those actions, including both genetic and environmental factors. Things that you're born with, instincts, versus things that you experience, things that shape you, that are surrounding you. Because those things are going to be essential for survival. And depending on the environment you live in, adaptations you have to make, they can change over time. The ones that you're born with are going to be called innate behaviors. They're developmentally fixed. They're not learned. You can say that they are from birth. For example, when a turtle hatches, it's going to crawl out of the egg, and then once it makes its way onto the shore, it's then going to try to crawl towards the ocean. Hopefully that the little turtles can make it. This is going to ensure that activities that are essential to survival are performed correctly without practice, because if they're essential to survival, you want to be able to do them correctly. And so these things are going to be genetically fixed in us so that we don't have to think about them. They're things that we can just do. All right, some things like, we'll look up here first, follow the arrow, migration, regular long distance change in location. We know a lot of birds migrate. They're not the only ones, but this sense of needing to move within season is a fixed pattern that doesn't have to be necessarily taught. They know they need to do it. The way that they migrate within their group, that might need to be learned, but the idea of moving is going to be fixed in them. Another fixed behavior would be, or something that falls into this innate behavior, is circadian rhythm. Hopefully you have been able to maintain and keep a solid, normal schedule within this rhythm. Some of you, I'm sure, like myself, have slipped a little bit off of your usual schedule, but this circadian rhythm is this internal biological clock. And this is going to be what controls our eating, sleeping, the times that things happen during the day, the way we feel. You can see here, if I zoom in just a little bit, this is assuming that you wake up around 6 in the morning. It shows you, as you zoom into this, how things in your body change throughout the day. And then as you go throughout your day, how you can get into this cycle that helps you to just function better, because your body's able to produce and regulate according to the needs that it has in your day-to-day life. All right, and so everybody has one. It's when you go to bed and wake up, when you eat your meals, whether you eat breakfast at 7, lunch at 12, and dinner at 5, or any other times. It lets your body know when you need things, and then your body's able to produce and meet those needs. So that's very important. Humans are not the only ones. All animals have a sense of this biological clock in them that lets them know when it's time to do certain things. Signals are going to be the ways that animals communicate. They're a stimulus that is sent out and received, and it's going to then change a behavior in some way. It's the basis of animal communication, because they can't talk. Assuming, you're not Dr. Dolittle or something, can't have verbal communication in the human language with them, but there are a lot of different ways that you can communicate, specifically 1, 2, 3, and 4, that I'm going to talk about with animals. Pheromones are going to be chemicals that are emitted by species that are going to affect other animals. And so this is going to be almost like a scent that's released off, and other animals can pick up on this, and they can detect and sense, and they can be linked for warning, for mating, wide variety of purposes, but it'll be a chemical that is emitted or released by an animal. Visual signals are going to be image warning signs, visual indicators, the mimicry. It's when an animal sends off some kind of visual gesture or makes themselves look like something else, just to give off a warning sign of, hey, this is, like to protect themselves, or don't come near me. Or maybe that's a grand gesture for mating. They're trying to win the attraction of a mate, maybe. Tactile would be touch response, where there's a physical touch involved. And then auditory signals would be a noise indication. For example, dogs barking. Another one would be just any kind of noise that's going to be made by an animal. Cat meowing or purring or hissing. Anything like that would be an auditory signal. Humans speaking and communicating, me talking to you right now, would be an auditory signal, because you're able to listen and hear what I'm saying. And so those are all going to be kind of natural instincts. There'll be the nature and the nature versus nurture. The rest of these are going to be learned behaviors. I did forget to mention the honeybee dance language would be a visual form of learning. Bees, when it looks like they're flying around in random patterns, are actually using those random patterns to communicate, and they can be used to communicate food sources or directions, things like that. So when you see a bee flying around you, you aren't being targeted, usually, unless you've made the bee mad. It's usually that the bee is flying, and that pattern that it's flying around you is indicating something about you to other bees. And so it's not trying to attack you. Let the bee go on in peace. Unless you made it mad, then you might want to get out of the situation as quick as possible. All right, the nurture or learned behaviors. These are going to be behaviors that are modified based on specific experiences. Skills that have either been taught or observed. You do that, like when you learn, you are either going to have someone teach you to do something in a sort of hands-on way, or you're going to learn by watching someone do something else. Animals are the same way. And so these next few behaviors that we'll go through are all ones that can either be taught or observed, and then it's going to be the knowledge gained from that experience is then going to make it a learned behavior. The first one is habituation. It's a loss of responsiveness to stimuli that convey little or no information. And so as you are exposed to something over and over and over and over, you become habituated to it. It loses its excitingness or its newness, and so then your brain doesn't really perceive it as being important, and so things can be happening around you and you not even realize that they're happening, or things that might be dangerous or might be different just become normal. And so example, there'd be squirrels on a college campus. Typically, if you're out and you see a squirrel, if you make any kind of motion, it'll set the squirrel off and it takes off. On a college campus, because they're around people so much, squirrels will tend to come up and be around people almost to where you can touch them, and it's not a big deal to them. They've become habituated to people. Same thing with ducks. If you go to a park and you have ducks at your park that are on like a little pond or a little lake there, those, once they become habituated, they'll come up. They're the ones that want to ask you for bread all the time. Usually because people feed them and they know that people are associated with food. And we'll learn about that connection when we get down to associative learning with classical conditioning. The next one is imprinting. And so this is learning plus the innate components. It's a mixture of both kind of naturally knowing to do something and then observing. It's limited to early stages in the life. And this is where animals are going to look for guidance and behavior to follow. And so we see Conrad here and his geese. And so there is no mother goose. And so Conrad is having to teach the geese how to walk in a line. He's teaching them behaviors so that they can be normal geese. So Conrad, being a human, is pretending to be the mother goose to teach the geese how to behave. He is imprinting those skills to them. The next is spatial learning, which is going to be this idea of a cognitive map. It's your internal representation of spatial relationships in the environment. And so it's how you perceive the area around you in your brain, how you understand your environment, how to get from one place to the other. And that's going to be helpful in terms of finding things, escaping predators, all very important. Understanding how things are spaced out. And this is a learned skill. Understanding personal space. Some of you are still trying to figure that out. But that is going to be another form of learned behavior, is taking in visually or observing your environment and then processing the spatial relationship among objects in that environment. And that usually involves moving through the environment to understand and figure that out as well. We see here that a bird, once it has stored food, could then relocate its food supply by having that cognitive map working and understanding and remembering where its food source was. The next one is cognition, and this is the process of knowing that involves awareness and then reasoning and recollection and judgment, understanding how to solve problems. Cognition is your problem-solving behavior, learning how to make things, get out of situations. We see here where they have stuck something in a tube and given the bird a hook to use to get its food out. And so the bird then, they start off, they put the food in the tube, and they give the bird the stick, and then it learns that if it sticks the stick into the tube, it can get the food out and learn and understand. And so that is a way of working out a problem and then understanding it. Another way would be if you've ever seen the cup stacking or the rings that animals use, like especially like the little projects with the monkeys, that would also be problem-solving behavior. Associative learning, which I mentioned earlier, is going to be the ability to associate, hence associative learning, one stimulus with another. And so there's two kinds of associative learning. There's classical conditioning, which is pairing two stimuli, usually where a connection is going to be made between an unconditioned stimulus, something that's just happening. So you can take two random things and they cannot be related, but you can introduce a neutral stimulus, and then your brain pairs that neutral stimulus with the unconditioned stimulus, and you have this pairing outcome where when your brain hears, sees, observes, expects or if one stimulus is introduced, the other is expected. And so we see this with Pavlov. He was a psychologist, and his dog, where he gives his dog the meat and then rings the bell, and then over time he takes the meat out of the equation, but he rings the bell and the dog begins to salivate, because when the dog hears the bell, he expects the meat that he's going to get to eat. Another way I heard it was I watched a video on the two of these, and it talked about with classical conditioning, it says if you are going to be doing something a hobby that you enjoy, and then you do put it to music, every time you hear that song, your body then prepares or expects hobby to follow. But that would be a pairing of things, doing one thing and expecting something to come with it, a pairing of two stimuli. Another one would be the monarchs here, where this bluebird is going to eat the monarch or the butterfly. It eats it, it equates the monarch with a foul taste. So now every time the bird sees the butterfly, it knows not to eat it. The other is operant conditioning. Basically, you can think of it as operating conditioning. I mean, the way that you do things. It's an association between behavior and consequences. And so the whole premise is that you get a positive reward or a negative consequence after a behavior, and that's going to either encourage or discourage the behavior. So, for example, if my daughter Kylie wants to play with the electrical outlet, I know to get onto her and correct her. And so she knows to associate that discipline with the bad thing so that she shouldn't do it. Whereas if I'm training my dog, or you're training a pet of yours and you want them to do a trick and you get them to successfully do the trick, you reward that condition with a treat. And then they know that next time that you ask them to do it, they're going to get the treat. And so they are more likely to start doing that behavior. Same thing with negative behavior with an animal as well. And you can use this operant conditioning to kind of train up or try to get desired behaviors in a way by either encouraging or discouraging with rewards and consequences. We see that in a classroom setting as well. You are subject to operant and classical conditioning yourselves. The last one under this learning behavior is social learning. And this was simply learning by observing others. Easy way to think about this one is going to be monkey see, monkey do. And so very simple, easy one there. Another behavior that can be exemplified is foraging, which is a food obtaining behavior. The way animals go about getting their food, how they get it, the risk reward cost involved, that is all going to fall under foraging. Mating and sexual selection. There are different types of relationships that occur within a variety of different species. Everything from promiscuous to monogamous, polygamous, and polyandry. You can see here the different partners and structure and care. And so promiscuous is going to have many partners. There's not a relationship involved there. It's basically trying to promote offspring success and promoting your genetic line as much as possible with as many mates as possible. Monogamous organisms are going to usually pick one mate, settle down. And when I say settle down, they will stay together as much as possible. And then they will have however many offspring that they're going to have. Usually involves one male, one female. That's it. Promiscuous can be as many male or females as possible. Polygamous will be one male and many females. Polyandry is the reverse of polygamy. It's one female with many males. Very showy. Promiscuous is also very showy, meaning that there's a lot of attention involved in this, both good and bad. And so these are the different types of relationships that you see in nature. And so just, you can look at this, check this out. There'll be a couple questions on it on the test. Agonistic behavior are the threats, rituals, and sometimes combat. And so you see here, animals fighting over different disputes. What they're fighting over, I don't know. But usually all interaction between animals, if there's any kind of fighting or anything like that, can usually be about one of three things. 1, 2, or 3 things. It's either going to be food, territory, or mates. And so that's what 3 things animals usually always fight over. If you see a dispute, it's usually going to be a single item or a combination of all 3 of those. And then our last behavior is altruistic behavior. It's selfless behavior. It encourages the good of the group over the good of the individual. It's taking care of and helping out, which is something we could all learn from during this time, trying to be good. I know nobody wants to stay at home in quarantine, but think about it this way, is that you're trying to help increase the fitness of our species by staying home, not exposing other people to the virus. And so this would be a good behavior to learn and exemplify during this time, as opposed to fighting over toilet paper and bacon at the grocery store. So I hope that this video was helpful to you. And if you have any questions, you can email me. Don't forget, your projects are due this week. I will see you on Zoom then. And I hope that you are going to have a great rest of the day. Bye.